What is up, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Crawdad Lake. It is me, Video Person 102, and today we'll be reading part 9 through 16 of Losing Control by ElliottGreen333, a standard-sized Wattpad fanfiction. If you want to get a special announcement, wait till the end of the video and the cool stuff will happen. With that being said, on with the video. I opened my eyes slowly and was greeted with the ceiling. The room was spinning slightly and my body was stiff. My head felt heavy, like it was full of stuff. I slowly started to push myself up and lean against the dresser where I got to my feet. I looked around my room, which was still dark and gloomy. The purple paint on my walls seemed lighter and I remember, but I let it slide. Despite the sea draining a little amount of my aura and power, I felt fine. I was just slightly weaker and had a headache. I pushed off against my dresser, walking over to the bed, and took a seat on my bed. I grabbed my laptop from my nightstand and started to log into my Netflix. A movie could cheer me up, right? As I searched for a movie to calm my mind, I started hearing voices. They were telling me things I haven't thought in a long time. You mean nothing to the light sides. You're useless to them. You just make things worse. They were like little whispers, just barely loud enough to hear. It was driving me crazy. I covered my eyes, hoping that would help, but it didn't. The voices were in my head, not outside my head. I began to think about what I did in the past, stopped the thoughts, and pushed me towards insanity. Something came into mind. I sighed, removing the laptop from my lap and walking to the bathroom. How long has it been? Long enough, I guess. Opening the medicine cabinet, I saw a razor blade and a tinted red at the blade portion. The blade was sparkling, like welcoming an old friend. I grabbed it, shakily rolling up my sleeve. I looked at my arm that was littered with rusty colored scars. I sighed, tracing over the first old scar. No going back now. I continued to trace them. It was like a coloring sheet kid do, except worse. When I was done, there was a small red puddle on the bathroom floor. I cleaned quickly before any major staining could occur. I didn't bother to bandage the tracing I had done, just leaving it to scar. I cleaned off the blade and heard a knock at my door. I quickly set the blade back in the medicine cabinet and shut the door behind me. Rolling my sleeve back down and pulling on my hood, I answered the door. I was greeted by Roman. Wait, what? He never comes to my room. Hey, Roman, I said simply, not wanting to seem different. I couldn't identify his facial expression. It was different, a mix of multiple thoughts and concerns. Something I was all too familiar with. Thomas wants to talk to you, Roman said. That's not good. Whenever Thomas wants to talk to me, I probably did something wrong. I nodded to Roman and sunk down. When I rose up, Thomas's living room, it was just him and I. He looked happy to see me, which was new. Hey there, Virg, Thomas spoke at last. I weaved slightly and watched as he continued. So, this is probably gonna sound weird, but are there two anxieties? I raised my eyebrows at the question. What do you mean? I mean, I'm feeling like I have two different anxieties fighting in my brain. One is the usual, the worries about the videos, and the small fears, like trying to remember whether or not I locked the door when I left my house. I nodded. That's usually what I do. I don't want to make it any worse, seeing as if in the past that hasn't worked out too well for Thomas or for me. The other anxiety is like insulting me and putting me down, telling me I'm not good enough or that I'm a failure. I gave Thomas a shocked look and he reacted accordingly. Is something wrong? I don't want him to worry, although I'm sure I already had done that. No, it's alright. Probably just some rogue side deep in the mind palace. I'll sort him out. Thanks for letting me know, Thomas. Bye. I said as quickly as I possibly could and sunk out even faster. I rose up in the mind palace living room with Peta and Logan and Roman looking at me. I blushed. What? Part 10, Episode 1, Roman. As I watched Virgil sink down into the real world, I couldn't help but notice how pale and unhealthy he looked. It broke my heart to know that he might be not doing well as he leads on. I pushed back tears and walked to my room. Once I shut the door, I walked to my bed and belly flopped onto it, face first. I started to wonder why Thomas needed Virgil. It sounded really important when I heard him talk about it. I decided to watch a movie to take my mind off of everything. Disney, of course. Sitting up from my bed and walking over to the dresser to get my laptop, I came face to face with my reflection in the mirror that was mounted above my dresser. I looked so conflicted. I knew why. My heart was telling me things that my head wasn't wanting to believe. I really liked Virgil a lot. I wanted to help him. I wanted to figure out what was making him like this. The Virgil I had just talked to wasn't the same Virgil that I was falling in love with. This Virgil is not okay. He's broken. Stepping out of my thoughts, I saw I was crying. I shook my head and assumed a tissue in my hand to wipe my wet face with. I took a deep breath and threw the tissue away. Something inside of me just clicked. I can't have Virgil like this. What Virgil needs is a brave and heroic person that would be the rock in his life. I shook my hands out loosely and smiled at myself. I can do this. Just then, I got a knock on my door. I opened it fully to see Logan looking up at me with a slightly nervous expression mounting his usual stone face. Might want to hear this, Logan said simply. He led me into the living room where the control panel was. Here, we can see and hear Thomas's world. Peta was sitting on the couch with nervous tears streaming on his face. Logan backed up in the memory and played it for me. I could see Virgil. He looked nervous as usual, probably because Thomas doesn't usually summon him alone. So, this is gonna sound weird, Thomas spoke first. But are there two anxieties? I watched Virgil's eye raise, as did mine. What do you mean? Virgil responded. Thomas went on to talk to Virgil about what both anxieties are doing. Virgil looked like he was about to cry at any second. Something told me a panic attack was bubbling inside of him. In a rush of thoughts and emotions, Virgil quickly said, No, it's alright. Probably just some rogue side and deep part of the Mind Palace. I'll sort him out, Thomas. Thanks for letting me know. Bye. I pushed past Logan and Patton and ran out to the living room, sitting in front of Virgil's spot where he'd rise up. While waiting, Logan and Patton stood behind me. He slowly rose and made eye contact with each of us before saying, What? Part 10, Episode 2, Virgil. What? I looked into each of my friends' eyes, and I got a sinking feeling in my gut. Logan looked nervous, which was something I never saw from him. Patton had dried tear streaks on his face. I felt even worse seeing that Patton had been crying. Then Roman. He looked like he was ready to wrap his arms around me and cry as well. I would let him. After what Thomas said, I wasn't so sure about my deal with Deceit. I could feel my hands shake in my pockets and blood running down my arm. The contract was bleeding. Shit. My face grew red in my friend's eyes and my own nervousness. What is it? I barked again. They all took a step back. My eyes widened. I didn't mean this. I didn't want this. Shit. I made an effort to run up the stairs to my room. I felt a hand grab my wrist, pulling me to a stop. I looked back to see Roman was the one that had me in his grasp. His hand was bleeding, contract which only made me hiss. Even when he didn't let go, I stopped fighting him and just stood still on the stairs while the others watched me. What do you mean there is another side in the mind that's causing havoc for Thomas? Logan spoke. My breath was shaky. I knew that it wasn't true. It had to be Deceit, but I couldn't tell them that. Are you having trouble with your aura? Patton asked. I held back a sob. I was facing away so the others couldn't see the waterfalls flowing from my eyes. It would be hard enough to lie to Logan. Patton? Hell no. I couldn't lie to him. What do I do? Virgil, are you okay? Roman asked. I couldn't hold back anymore. I sobbed loud enough for them to hear, despite my efforts to keep it quiet. I felt my wrists calm free as Roman dropped them from his grip. My arms wrapped around me. I just wanted to be over. The secret, the deal. Maybe it could have stopped the future Deceit showed me. Maybe there was something I could have done. I could have talked to the others. Then again, I couldn't. I looked up the stairs and my heart sank. Deceit was leaning against the railing of the stairs, watching me from the top step. He had a devilish grin on his arms and were crossed. He then looked down, tilting his head up as the body stared at glow and yellow hue. I noticed my body begin to do the same. I wanted to look back at the other sides, but to no surprise, they were quietly talking to each other, not seeing Deceit or my new yellow glow. Slowly, my aura started leaving me just as it done before. My knees grew weak and wobbly. I dropped to my knees in the stairs, which was an odd position. Virgil? Rowan questioned. I felt his hand leave my shoulder, trying to comfort me, although now wasn't the time. He didn't seem to notice my hue. Maybe he couldn't see it. I heard Logan and Patton rush over. I tried to get one last look at Deceit, but my eyes were so heavy, and I hung my head down as I slipped from reality. Part 11. Logan. I watched for a second, seeing Virgil drop to his knees, and Roman place a comforting hand on his shoulder. Virgil looked like he was in pain, but wasn't making any sort of sound to prove it. Patton rushed over to the other side of Virgil, and I followed behind him. Patton squawked down to meet Virgil's eyes, but Virgil made no sign of looking back at him, or even seeing Patton in the first place. Kiddo? Patton paused, thinking of any way he could get a response from the side in front of him. Virgil, can you hear me? Patton's voice was getting louder. I was a little stunned by Patton and used Virgil's name. He usually uses design names he has for each of us. He'll call us kiddo, rarely by our first names. Virgil's head lifted slightly up the stairs, and then his head dropped down. Roman's other hand moved onto Virgil's back to prevent him from falling down the stairs. His head dropped to his side, and I could see his eyes were closed and his lips were parted slightly. Virgil had passed out. I looked up the stairs to where Virgil's eyes had tried to go, but I didn't see anything. I looked back down at Virgil and watched Patton shake him by the arms, trying desperately to wake Virgil. Come on, Virgil. Wake up. Please. His voice grew shaky. He quickly gave up after that and instead cried into his hands. Patton ran up the stairs and into his room, with nothing but slamming the door in his wake, leaving myself and Roman to deal with the anxious side. What do you think happened to him? Roman asked. I'm not sure. Maybe not enough sleep. I pondered. Although, I looked a little closer at Virgil. His skin was so pale and his hair seemed a little lighter brown than normal. The shadows under his eyes were much lighter than when he had popped up into the living room a few minutes ago. If my books on him were correct, something is very wrong. In a blind minute of panic, I looked to Roman with a calm gaze. Probably not enough sleep. Take him to his room and make him sure that he rests up fully. I didn't want to worry Roman. I know about his crush on Virgil. It's pretty obvious. Roman nodded and picked Virgil up bridal style and walked him to his room. I opened the door for Roman, but was slightly shocked when I entered his room. The walls were almost pale purple instead of the usual almost black purple. His posters were torn up and his curtains were trashed. I gulped and let Roman enter. He looked just as shocked as me. Roman looked past the room and instead put Virgil down gently on his bed and sat down next to him, stroking his hair. I gave a small smile and brushed my hair back out of my face. You think you could take it from here, Roman? Yes, of course, Roman said. He quickly stood up and flustered look as if he didn't really know about his feelings towards Virgil. I nodded and walked out the room, shutting the door. Now to check on Patton. I walked down the hall towards the stairs until I was met up with the bright blue door. Before I even knocked, I could hear his muffled cries that pulled my heartstrings like they were strings of a harp. I knocked lightly and heard him gasp. "Patton? It's me. Logan. Are you doing okay?" He opened his door and started to cry heavily again. I wrapped my arms around him and felt his body pour his tears into my shirt. It took him a minute before he walked into his room and sighed and let me follow. I shut the door behind me and looked around. The room looked just as I remembered it from last time we were here for a video. I sat next to Patton on his bed and watched as he calmed down slightly. I put my hand under his chin so that our eyes were locked. My heart was now more in a drum than a heart, beating like it's never done before. Patton's lips were parted, and his eyes were innocent. I smiled and leaned in. When our lips touched, it was like fireworks that had just gone off. His lips were like soft pillows, and we both melted into it. When we parted our lips, I looked deeply into his eyes again. "You want to talk about it?" Pat nodded, and I let my hand, that was on his chin, fall, and our hands were locked together. I just want to know, is Virgil all right? He's gone through so much with us and in his past. The kiddo deserves a break. Look at him." Patton sighed. I could tell that his shoulders felt lighter as he spilled his mind to me. I held his hand tighter. "I get what you mean. Unfortunately, though, that's not how life works. I'm sorry that that's how you feel, Patton. But once he is awakened better, I'm going to help him, to our very best of my ability." Patton smiled brightly, while his arms wrapped me in a tight hug. I kissed the top of his head and rested my forehead against his. "I love you, Patton, and I will stop at anything to make sure that you are happy and well." "I love you too, Logan." We hugged like this for a couple of minutes, until Patton yawned. His arms dropped down. I put my hand on his back of his head, lowering him to his pillow as he slipped into sleep. I quietly stepped out of his room, closing the door. When I heard another door close, I saw Roman walk into his room. Seeing as Roman would never leave Virgil in the condition that he was in, I assumed Virgil was awake. Part 12, Episode 1, Roman. Once again, Logan left the room. I sat back down on Virgil's bed and stroked his hair. His hair was so soft and smooth. I wonder what he uses. Instead of waiting around like a creep until Virgil wakes up, I decided to look around the room. I know he'd probably hate this, but if there is anything here that'll help me find out how to make him better, I'm going to find it. I went over to his desk where he had a locked journal and many pages of sketches. They were all so amazing. I looked through some of them, and I saw one of me? He was beautiful. The line work was clean and exact, while the coloring almost looked real. The shading on the drawing was incredible, too. It was a masterpiece. My smile was so wide, I was worried about breaking the jaw, so I continued my search. Making my way to his dresser, he had lots of books sitting on the top. A lot of books were self-help and guides on drawing. One caught my eye, though. It was a yellow book of 2 snake heads and 1 body. I couldn't have missed it. The title read, Deceit. Why did Virgil have a book on deceit? Maybe for some reason that I have a book on Remus. I put the book back in the spot to make it look untouched and entered his bathroom. His bathroom looked like mine, so it was nothing special. I went to the sink and saw the faintest red rim near the drain. I looked in the medicine cabinet and opened it up. I was shocked when I learned what was inside. There were pill bottles for anti-anxiety and depression, his makeup, and a razor blade. I put my hand over my mouth to avoid screaming or crying. I grabbed the blade and looked at its red rim, much like a sink. I put the blade in my pocket and nearly dropped it when I heard moaning. I wiped around and saw Virgil start to stir. I quickly ran over and took a seat on his bed calmly. I watched as he slowly opened his eyes and surveyed around his surroundings. His eyes darted to me and sat back up on his bed. When he was up, his body swayed a bit. His arms reached out, and I grabbed him and tried to steady him. "Easy there," I said. He shook his head and stopped swaying. His eyes looked back at me. What happened?" I gave him a nervous look. "Do you not remember?" He shook his head. I sighed and tried to explain. "Well, up came back from seeing Thomas because I told you that. I remember that, just..." He paused, trying to think of to point where he couldn't remember. "What happened after you let go of my wrists?" I nodded and took a breath. "Well, you wrapped your arms around yourself, and then me. Pat and Logan started talking, and what we thought was going on with you. Then you fell onto your knees." Virgil nodded along to my story as I continued. "Then Pat started to talk to you, but you didn't give a sign of answering. Then you... well..." I stopped. Will this worry him if he knows this? I hope not. He seemed eager to know, and he was every right to know. "Then you dropped your head and passed out," Virgil gasped. He brought his knees to his chest and played with his sleeves. He looked like he was remembering what he was going through in his mind at the time. But you're okay now." I tried to cheer him up, but to no avail. "You are okay now, right?" I questioned. I could see the Virgil's eyes that his mind was running a mile a minute. He opened his mouth a couple times as if to speak, but would only shake his head and return to the drawing board in his mind. Finally, he looked up at me. "Roman, I need to tell you something." I shuffled close to him and put my hand gently on his. He blushed and started to talk before he changed his mind. "You see, I made this deal." His eyes shut up, and his body stiffened as if on command. "Virgil, are you okay?" He didn't answer. I shook his leg. "Virgil!" Suddenly, his eyes became black and dark bursts of energy shot out through his chest. I fell on his bed in surprise, only watching in shock, as that was the only thing I could do. Virgil's hands were on his head, trying to calm down and stop whatever was happening. I could see tears running down his face. I could feel the tension in the thick air. My body finally moved, and I stood up and tried to make my way to Virgil, but I felt something wrap around my leg. I was lifted into the air by one of the tentacle-like energy bursts coming from Virgil's chest, hanging upside down, watching Virgil helplessly make me almost sick. I had to act fast, or else... who knows what will happen. I grabbed my sword and cut this tentacle off my leg. As I fell to the floor, I heard Virgil scream. I realized by cutting the monstrous thing, I was also hurting Virgil. I fought back tears. I didn't mean to hurt him. I quickly stood up and was ready to repay him for hurting him. I found my way to him until I could see his fully panicked self through the beast spew from his chest. I put my hands on his shoulders and leaned in. I kissed him directly on the lips and watched his eyes go back to their normal, usual brown. Even though his expression was still shocked, his body loosened and calmed down until he started to return my kiss. The monstrous retreated back inside of him, and I smiled as we pulled apart. Virgil's hands were shaking, and his skin seemed even paler, as if possible. "Get out," Virgil mumbled. "What?" I said. Thank you for everything, but please, get out." He put his face in my hands. "I don't want to hurt you anymore." I fell back, hugging him or kissing him again, as if I knew that would only upset him. I followed his wish and left the room, letting the tears free fall as I stormed to my room, his blade still in my pocket. 12. Episode 2, Virgil. Roman left my room, and then almost on cue I ran to the bathroom. My entire face was wet in tears. My chest hurt like crazy, whether from guilt or the monster that had just revealed itself to Roman. I opened my medicine cabinet in a panic. I need cut. My heart dropped when I couldn't find it. This is the only piece I ever put it. I checked my pockets, but nothing. I started to shake. I put my back against the wall and I slid down in, crying. I'm a mess. I knew that, but I couldn't help it. I felt a presence on my left. I was scared to look, but I did anyway. All I saw were combat boots with a cape behind them. I followed the body upwards to meet with Deceit, who did not look happy. He extended his foot forward and kicked me on my side. I flew to the side, lifting off the ground a little bit, until I landed on the floor in my main bedroom. I grabbed my side. I could only watch helplessly as Deceit's feet pounded on the floor, making my way towards me. I closed my eyes, curling myself. Deceit's gloved hand had wrapped around my neck and picked me up. I could feel my face become blue, while his yellow eye looked into the dead center of mine. You broke our rule, Deceit yelled. He then threw me onto the ground. Before I could react further, he picked up and threw me against the wall. In the position I was now in, my face was jammed into the wall, and my back was facing Deceit. He had his magic hold my arms over my head. At the point, I couldn't feel my legs. I feel Deceit's hand slither down to the end of my jacket and shirt. He pulled them up so my bare-skinned back was exposed to him. I heard a sound that sounded very familiar to a knife coming out of his cover. I wanted to squirm, but I couldn't move. As for my voice, it felt like it was stolen. The knife made contact with my back and slowly slid down my back line. I bit my lip. The pain was unbearable, but still, I couldn't move. Once Deceit made the line, he came back at it, cutting deeper into my back, which made small tears leak from my eyes. I whimpered weakly, making Deceit slam my face into the wall and his free hand. Shut up, he barked. I obeyed, whatever I could to make him stop. Finally, the knife went out of my back, and his hands were set free from his magical grasp. My legs still couldn't support me, so I began to trip backward, only to be caught trust-fall style by Deceit himself. I gazed up at him, seeing his yellow eyes glow. He gave a toothy grin and chuckled to himself. This hurt, didn't it? I nodded. Every part of me was tired and growing weaker by the second. I could feel my eyes glow the more I looked into Deceit's. I fought his gaze, snapping my head down. I looked straight ahead. His hand slithered down my chin, making me quiver as he tilted my head back, to looking in his eyes again. You're growing weaker, Virgil, meaning soon you will be mine. I shook my head, trying to get my thoughts in line. The yellow glow kept clouding my vision and my mind. I was barely thinking my own thoughts anymore. You have 2 more strikes left, Virgil. He dropped me once again, and I fell flat on the floor. I blinked a couple times as my own thoughts swarmed back into my mind. I looked back towards Deceit, who was walking backwards in a corner. Keep Virgil safe, and I won't ever have to do that again. He vanished into the shadow of the corner, and I laid on my back, looking at the ceiling. My head was spinning, but I wasn't dizzy. More confused. I heard a knock at my door, which made my hair stand on the end. I wasn't in the mood for any company, but I didn't want anyone to worry any more than I probably was. Getting off the floor slowly, I made my way towards the door. Part 13. Virgil. The knocking from behind the door began to make my ears ring, like something being drilled into the back of my skull. Now my hand was touching the doorknob. I didn't feel like I had the strength to push down on the doorknob, but I knew I had to. On my way down to open the door, I pulled back to see Logan. He didn't look worried at first, but once he saw that I was mainly using the door to hold myself up, his panic began to bleed through the solid expression. I could feel my sweaty hand slowly slip from the doorknob. I let myself keep leaning more and more towards the floor. Had I lost my mind? When did I learn to be so careless about getting hurt? I could feel the metal doorknob wasn't in my grasp anymore. The floor fell towards me, fast, but it stopped suddenly. I shook my head, immediately feeling less foggy. Feeling once again all my anxieties about everything slither back into me. I looked to see that Logan had caught me and was grabbing my other hand. He was holding all my weight and seemed to be struggling in doing so. He wasn't very strong. I grounded my feet and pulled myself up, meeting Logan's worried look. "Are you all right?" he asked. "Yeah, I'm fine." "Why did you almost fall on the floor? Willingly?" I guess I wasn't really paying attention. I said to cover up. I was pretty lightheaded from Deceit's carving section in the back of him attempting to control me. I felt better now, but I had to be more strong. "Something you never will be," said the voice in the back of my mind. Logan helped guide me to my bed so we could both sit and talk. Once he made sure that I was sat on my bed and feeling better, he shut my bedroom door and took a seat next to me. "Virgil," he began. I was already sweating from nervousness. "I know you haven't been in the peak of physical condition lately, and my question is, why?" I brought my hands together in my lap. It wasn't that it was hard to directly lie to Logan's face, but he's a human lie detector. I bit my lip, starting to taste blood. He raised his eyebrow at me. "Oh shit. I've been staring at him, haven't I? Okay. I could still save the conversation and not have anything go wrong." I don't know what you're talking about." I said it with a tremble. He cocked his head slightly, if I was brain dead. He pushed his glasses up as the wheels in his brain continued to spin. "Virgil, is it normal for you or anyone to pass out without a reason?" Who said I didn't have a reason? My pupils shrunk as soon as the sentence rolled off my tongue. Why did I say that? I started to breathe faster and my hands shook. I could feel the contracts start to run, flowing blood, and if I didn't hide it, Logan would see it and the other sides would die because of me. I couldn't let it happen. I can't. "Virgil!" Logan yelled. I looked at him dead in the eye, trying to read his expression. He seemed like he had been trying to get my attention for a couple minutes. "What do you mean, you had a reason?" I haven't eaten in a couple days," I managed to say. I gulped down as Logan had taken back. "Why didn't you say that sooner? I'll make sure Patty makes you something right away." I took a deep breath. I felt myself calm down lightly. Logan looked content with that and with what he was accomplished. He stood up and from my bed and made his way towards the door. Before he opened the door, he looked back at me. "Are you sure that's all that was troubling you, Virgil?" Logan asked. I felt like crying for some reason. I felt like screaming to him about the deal and what just happened with Roman. I felt like giving up on his deal, but I can't let my friends die. Maybe there's another way. I just nodded back, and Logan watched him open the door and leave, shutting the door behind him. I sighed heavily as I felt water threaten to leave my eyes. At this point, I let it happen. I cried, and I cried hard. I was tired, and today was just the icing on the shitty cake. I continued to cry until I grew tired and fell asleep. Deep, dark sleep. Part 14. Roman. Once I got into my room, I shut the door harshly and paced around my room. My mind was moving like lightning speed. My heart was barely keeping up. What had happened to Virgil? What was that thing? What was he trying to tell me? I almost couldn't bear the weight of this situation anymore. I jumped onto my bed and laid out like a starfish, just staring at my ceiling. I was trying to make sense of the thoughts boiling in my head. I was starting to get a headache. I stood up slowly, making sure I wouldn't faint or anything, and walked out of my room. While walking down the stairs, I came to the conclusion that I wasn't just having a headache, but a migraine. Once I got down the last step, I scanned the living room, slowly mapping out the mind palace, which only made my head hurt more. I saw Patton sitting on the sofa, tapping gently on his phone. His smile was bright and his freckles lit up the phone screen. He looked well. rested, which wasn't a look Patton donned very often. When he noticed me, he waved his hand sporadically, jumping off the sofa and shoving his phone into his pocket. "Hiya, kiddo!" Patton's voice beamed with energy. So much energy, it was too much for my pounding head to handle. I winced back a little, which Patton picked up right away. He walked to me calmly. "What's up, kiddo?" "Oh, I got a migraine, I think," I said, trying to make it seem like I was okay, but I'm sure my facial expression and the pain in my usually glowing demeanor was saying otherwise. "Oh, Princey," Patton said, putting a hand on my back and guiding me towards the sofa. "Why don't you just get comfortable position and I'll get you some medicine, okay?" I nodded lightly and watched Patton bounce over to the hall closet where we kept our medicines. I lay down on the sofa, taking up a whole thing with my body while my legs relaxed and one arm rested on my feet, dangling off the ledge. Patton said a comfortable position, not a practical one. With the blanket on the sofa I covered my face with, blocking out the lights. I know Logan told me about this trick once when I had a migraine before. I could hear Patton come back. "Here you are, buddy," Patton said, guiding my hands to take 2 tablets and a glass of water. I tilted my hand back a little, putting both the tablets in my mouth and downing them with water. I gave my glass back to Patton and quietly sat with my face under the blanket. After a few seconds, I could still feel Patton standing over me. I chuckled a little. "It's okay, Patton. I'm feeling much better already." "Are you just saying that, though?" I blinked, taken back by Patton's question. "I could tell, kiddo. That's the same thing Logan tells me when he's under the weather and clearly not okay." "I bet you hear it a lot from Virgil, too, huh?" I chuckled again. "Not really. He learned not to lie to me. That or he can't bring himself to do so." I could hear Patton plop himself down on the floor next to the sofa. He put his hand on my leg but I moved as soon as he made contact with my leg. "Oh, does it hurt?" he asked. "Oh, no, sorry, it just frightened me." Patton continued to rest his hand on my leg. There was a pause before he spoke again. "Am I bothering you by being here?" "Oh, never, Patton. You know I adore your company." I could feel Patton smile. He sighed for a long second. I was just going to talk, but he beat me to it. "Do you have any idea why you're having a migraine?" "Well, yeah. I don't know. I just came from Virgil's room and, well, something is very wrong with Virgil." Patton gasped. "How so?" "Well, and don't tell Virgil I told you this, but there was a monster from within him and it attacked me. He started to tell me something, but then the monster attacked me. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't like anything that could have happened to him or us." Patton stayed quiet. I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I removed the blanket from my face and turned to see Logan at the bottom of the step. Not saying I wasn't listening to the conversation, but you're right about one thing, Roman. That thing couldn't have come from us. But Virgil isn't like us. "Yes, he is!" I shut up, walking around the sofa and to meet eyes with Logan. "Sure, he might have come from somewhere else, but he is no less aside than you or me." "That's just it, Roman. It's where Virgil is from that makes him different. That's what makes the monster that you described a reality." My tense blood loosened. I didn't want to believe Virgil's past. He's made up for it generously and has let the memories of it die. "If you please." Logan moved away from me and took a seat in his chair in the living room. Patton and I sat down on the sofa, watching Logan as he began to speak. "The dark sides, as we call them, don't have auras like we do. We have auras to protect us from becoming negative or weak. Dark sides are like us without the auras, pre-made negative energy. This monster that came out of Virgil, if I'm correct, by Roman's description of it and my research, I'm thinking Virgil is losing the aura he's gained from being over here. Logan finished his conclusion and leaned back in the chair. Patton gasped, and I was lost for words. Psi's can't just lose their auras, whether dark or light, Patton said. You are right there, Logan said. Something is taking Virgil's aura. But what? Logan pondered. Hold on, I said. I thought our auras were the main sources of who we are as logic, mortality, creativity, and anxiety. Logan nodded. Indeed, it is. For us, our auras protect the monsters from coming in, but for Virgil, it keeps the monster from coming out. Without the monster, Virgil would be nobody. So this monster thing is what makes Virgil anxiety? Patton asked. Logan nodded in response. It can't come out unless the aura is fully removed, and by the looks of Virgil... We don't have a ton of time, I said, interrupting Logan, but we shouldn't force it either. Look at what happened when I tried to. Roman makes a good point, Patton said. He has to tell us willingly. Agreed, Logan and I said at the same time. We looked at each other with hope. Now that we had a sense of what was going on, we could prepare for the future. That was the plan. Until we heard a scream. 15. Virgil. I woke up with a ton of pain, with a sinking feeling deep into my gut. I opened my eyes just to see Deceit looming above me from a foot of my bed, grinning a full-faded smile. He had a yellow glow around him, meaning he was draining my aura once again. I let another scream of pain. Make it stop! I begged. His smile dropped as the glow faded from me, and the monster crawled back inside my stomach. I frantically tried to catch my breath as Deceit walked from the foot of the bed. Your clock is ticking, Virgil. I'd start writing your memoirs. He laughed. We looked away from each other and towards the door when we both heard banging from outside. Virgil! Penn's voice was muffled through the door. Kiddo, are you okay? Before I could answer, Deceit closed his fist, making a throat close. My face started to turn blue. I wanted to yell for help, but I couldn't. Deceit grinned and called out in my voice. Yeah, I'm fine. He looked back at me with a smirk. He opened his fist back up, and my throat opened. You'll pay for that, he mumbled, rubbing my neck. Oh, I think you will more than me, he said. He pointed towards my bathroom door while his eyes sparkled with joy. All of a sudden, I felt like I was going to puke. I pushed past the seat and opened the bathroom door in a rush. A slut next to me in the toilet, and I threw up. Are you throwing up? Roman yelled through the door. No. My voice cracked. Now I could hear the others trying to open my door. It was locked as usual. I didn't have the might to get up. Deceit was now nowhere in sight. I looked down and noticed the lock necklace that Deceit gave me when the deal was first made. I never wanted to rip something apart more. I tried to pull it off my neck, but it bound me as long as the deal was still intact. I quickly tucked it back under my jacket when I heard the unmistakable sound of hinges being broken and saw my door fall to the floor with the three shadows making their way towards the bathroom. I let my head fall against the wall. I was so tired. My eyes were barely open. I slowly blinked, and now I saw Roman was in front of me, shaking me slightly with fear and tears in his eyes. I put my hands in his lap and tried to fidget to keep me awake. I couldn't risk worrying them anymore if I passed out in front of them again. Patton was kneeling slightly, and Roman and Logan were standing next to Patton, reading through the book with anxiety written on the cover. Looking back at Roman, I felt tears pricking my eyes. I leaned forward, giving him all my body weight and wrapping my arms around him with a hug. My heart hurt as much as my aching body did. I don't know what to do anymore. Easy, Virgil. I got you, Roman said as he put his arms around me and kissed the top of my forehead. I could feel the blush, but couldn't be bothered to hide it. Panic gave me a worried smile, and I only replied in more tears. It's so sorry, guys, I muttered into Roman's arm. Don't be, kiddo, Patton said. We want to help you. Indeed, Logan followed, closing his book. He took a knee like Patton was and looked directly at me. Virgil, we know you're hurting and something isn't right, but we can't help you if you don't let us. I sat back and the three sides looked at me. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't take more aura being forcefully removed or Deceit carving into my back again. I took a breath. I'm a deal with Deceit. I dropped suddenly when I started to hear voices in my head. This felt familiar. I slowly put my hands up to my ears, trying to block them out. It wasn't helping, only making them worse. I could see Roman's mouth moving, trying to talk to me, but no sound was coming out. I arched my back and I started feeling a stabbing pain gliding down my back. It felt like the seat was carving to my back again. But how? I'm up against the wall. I knew the contract was bleeding down my arm when Logan rolled up my sleeve and tried to stop the bleeding. I queered and shook violently, my heart pumping faster, and I couldn't inhale. Roman grabbed my shoulders and I tried to stop me from shaking or moving too much, but it wasn't working. I screamed in pain and I watched the vision blur in my tears. The voices in my head grew into a loud white noise that I couldn't pay attention to any longer. Then I felt myself get pulled back quickly, the wind blowing through my hair like it was nothing. I faced the wall. I was outside in the Mind Palace house. How did I get here? I could barely process anything that just happened. Where was Roman? I need him right now. Something heavy clashed against my... And then the world went black. Part 16. Patton. What the hell? Roman shouted as we all hopelessly watched Virgil get pulled backwards into the wall by an unknown force. He faced the wall, leaving Logan, Roman, and me to stare at the wall where our friend just was. Where did he go? Logan said, with a confused glint in his voice. He shuffled closer to the wall and touching it, trying to feel for something that wasn't there. Roman stood up and started to pace around the room, hugging his knees. What was happening? I knew Virgil was hiding something. Maybe if I pushed a little harder or something, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Maybe this is my fault. Logan turned around and saw my discomfort at the situation. Logan sat to me and our hands came together as I put my head on his shoulder, slowly calming down. You heard what he said, right? Virgil made a deal with Deceit, Roman shouted. Why on earth would he do that? He must have had a good reason, I said quietly. Virgil isn't the type of person to do something unless he needs to. My question is, why does Deceit want Virgil's aura? Logan pondered, while flipping through the anxiety-titled book again. Logan, I thought you said you were getting rid of those books, I said. Roman looked at Logan, and Logan simply blushed and shut the book. He looked at me with heavy eyes and sighed. I was going to get rid of the books, but you just never know. What if Virgil corrupted one of us or something? I could figure out how to fix you and... How dare you even think that he would do such a thing when he wasn't even around to defend himself? Roman spat back at Logan. Logan looked like he was ready to fight back, but put a hand to his chest to try to stop him. He just looked at me and took a pause. You're right. Logan straightened his tie. I'm sorry, Roman. That was uncalled for. I'm not the one you need to apologize to. Roman crossed his arms in huff. Logan's whole body wilted a little. I was still slightly angry at him for making a comment, but I couldn't tell. He was speaking from his head, not his heart. I kissed him on the cheek, which made him hold my hand tighter. Logan pushed himself off the ground and then helped me to my feet. Logan adjusted his glasses and sighed. We can't just let our disagreements hinder us from finding Virgil. Agreed, Roman said. He crossed his arms and walked over to us. Virgil's our #1 priority. I nodded and smiled. I'm glad Logan and Roman were putting aside their disagreements for the greater good of our friend. Then we heard an evil laugh. From behind us, standing with one leg crossed in Virgil's bed, Deceit laughed. I must say, I'm a little sad Virgil didn't get to see that wonderful act of heroism in his honor, Roman. He'd be quite proud. Deceit spat. What did you do with him? Roman growled while taking a couple steps forward. I quickly grabbed him by the arm and held him back, shaking my head. As he looked back at me, Roman planted his feet again as we all death-glared Deceit. Deceit slowly stood up and faced us, with fists glowing purple. Oh, don't worry about him right now. Deceit moved his hands upward until they were pointing directly at us. His fists were glowing brighter with purple as he took aim towards Logan. Before either Roman or I could process, Deceit shot a purple blast of energy into Logan's chest, causing him to crumble to his knees. He groaned loudly, covering his ears with his hands. Logan! Logan, can you hear me? I said, sitting down on both knees, shaking him lightly. Logan looked up at me and I gasped. His eyes were dark black while he wore eyeshadow under his eyes. He was breathing heavily and shaking his head sporadically. Patton. He sounded so hurt and confused. I let tears fall from my eyes and I could only watch and hold him as he kept his hands over his ears. Roman turned to face Deceit, who was aiming to shoot him too. Roman whipped out his sword to block the attack that never came. Deceit instead lowered his arms and walked playfully over to Roman. He was still in fighting position, not taking his eyes off the moving snake. Roman took a swing at his sword and missed, and all I saw was Deceit vanish, only to reappear behind Roman. Can you imagine what Virgil would think about you if you couldn't save him? Deceit whispered into Roman's ear. What a prince, Deceit said in Virgil's voice mockingly. Could even save his own crush. How pathetic. Roman dropped his sword, and I watched the color practically drain from his body as Roman leaned against the wall, sliding down to hug his knees. Roman, no! I cried. Don't listen to him. Deceit's head wrapped around, but he smiled when he saw me. How could I forget little old Patton, the fun one, the one who, out of the four of you, lies the most. What? Oh, yes. I know all about that, don't I, Patton? Your emotions, your true feelings. I know them all, and I know that you can't hide them much longer. Stop! I begged. I covered my ears as I felt my body began to shake. How was Deceit doing this? I looked up at Deceit. He was now shooting a purple lightning strike at Roman, who was hugging himself tighter in pain. With Deceit's other hand, he shot at the lightning into Logan and me, causing us to moan in pain as well. I closed my eyes, trying to get a grip of my thoughts in my head. It became hard to focus on all of this anxious energy. Then when I opened my eyes, I was sitting on the floor of my room. Deceit, Roman, and Logan. Gone. And that is the end of today's Wattpad Read Aloud. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please feel free to give this video a like and subscribe if you want to get to the rest of the story, which I'm finishing next week. Next week. Yep, that's how it works. And as a surprise, do you see these beautiful images on your screen? Well, those are crawdad emojis that I have drew up for my 300 subscriber special. But since I was at the campground, I couldn't get them out to you guys. So here they are. You could save them to your computer or phone. I'll leave them in the description below if you want to use them and stuff. So yeah, that was my big surprise. Kind of underwhelming, to be honest, but still. Anyway, I really hoped you liked this. It was really hard to stay in character. Oh my god. So much emotion, so much drama. I had to pause it so many times and just sit there and, cackle at how much edginess there was. So anyway, like always, do your best.